In our third match here, we're playing against TheeBFG. Now, TheeBFG is another Twitch streamer who streams Magic Online, mostly modern, and he is playing Grixis Reanimator. Very similar to the list that we saw in round 1 against Arne. Now, BFG has been championing this deck for a little bit. I believe he's top 8'd a few modern challenges with it, so I am a little bit concerned about playing against him on it because he does know how to play it well enough, pretty well probably, to top 8 these modern challenges with it. And that also probably means he knows how to sideboard, or at least beat my sideboard plan of graveyard hate against him. Obviously, I'm not going to sideboard any differently, but it's possible that means that the ghost vacuums that I'm leaning on aren't going to be effective enough when I need them to be. So this 7 on the play is not great because it just doesn't interact with anything he's doing. It's not quick enough to kill him, and it's not actually that powerful when it does do its thing. This 6 is better, but we have the classic issue of Arena of Glory plus double planes. Now, maybe I'm just the most unlucky, but this Arena of Glory is basically a mull to 5 anyways, unless we draw another land, because it's not going to give us red mana until turn 4, unless we play it tapped, right? So it is useless. Now, Guide of Souls plus Ajani is very impactful, especially with the backup Ajani, but we actually are just still behind to him reanimating something and then putting a big creature into play, because those cards are just more powerful than ours on a 1-to-1 basis. And that's sort of exactly what happened here, where he Faithless Looting, discards Thoughtseize, which is dead, and an Aboran Oculus, and then unearths it. We don't have a way to kill the Oculus. I do have a way to sort of continue to pressure the board, but that's because I ripped this Ragavan, which is the best draw in my deck here, because it gives me a red permanent when I flip this Ajani, while also being a creature for Guide of Souls. Now, this point is interesting here because I think that this is actually a mild mistake, but might actually not matter that much. I could have played the Ragavan and the Ajani, zero the Ajani after flipping it and kill the Oculus, and then jump whatever creature I want to attack with. So I could jump the Guide of Souls and attack for 3, and the cat token. The cat token would still be a 2-1, but I would be attacking with the Guide of Souls, so I would have a few extra points of damage. The reason this could be bad is if opponent has Fatal Pushes, it kills the Guide of Souls, so I'm giving them more value when they kill the Guide of Souls. Alternatively, I could have just put the counters on the cat token and make it attack for 4. Attacking for 2 isn't necessarily bad, but I could have done more damage, and my play is always the same. I'm always going to zero this Ajani post-combat and kill this Aboran Oculus because I have to. I get to attack for 2 pre-combat, and it looks like I'm representing a way to kill this Oculus, but I'm killing the Oculus the same way no matter what. So I should be trying to get more damage now compared to trying to be fancy and trying to see if my opponent makes a bad block when they don't have to. And that's the most important thing, is that that block is very bad for them. They're almost never going to make that block. And if they do make that block, they probably have me crushed anyways. So why am I trying to force them to do something bad when I can just make a better play? And I got a little fancy and I missed a few points of damage. Luckily, their follow-up isn't anything amazing. Even though they have this Oculus and Archon in the graveyard, they don't have a way to reanimate either of them. We're drawing pretty well out of it, and even if they have a Fatal Push for one of our creatures that we are jumping with the energy, between this Ajani and all these tokens, we just have a very high damage output. Now, I'm assuming that this line that they're taking means that they have a Fatal Push in their hand, and I think that putting the counters on the Ragavan here is actually pretty loose. I think that I should probably just put the counters on a Cat Warrior token and not attack with the Ragavan. I think it's pretty obvious they have a Fatal Push, and if they don't have a Fatal Push, they're just very likely to die anyways. And if they're pushing the Ragavan, then they are Emperor of Bonesing this Archon no matter what, and dealing with our Ajani no matter what. So either I shouldn't be attacking with the Ragavan and I should be jumping the cat tokens to deal a few more points of damage again. So that's a few more points we've missed twice now. But also, this turn I'm really incentivized to plus the Ajani. And this turn, I'm really incentivized to also plus the Ajani rather than 0 after they push the Ragavan, because their main game plan is to Emperor of Bones this Archon or this Oculus. If I plus this Ajani, they're forced to attack it, but when they attack it, I can just sack it to the Archon trigger. Now, I could do that if I just 0 like I did here anyways, but again, if I jumped my cat tokens like I did, like I was supposed to 2 combats ago and last combat, I'd be attacking with 2 5X's in the air along with this Guide of Souls. So they would need another removal spell plus another removal spell because I have the ability to fly another creature, and that makes any creature in my deck most likely lethal and beats this Psychic Frog, I'm pretty sure, because they would also be at a few less points of damage. Although I'm drawing well and this Mull to 6 actually turned out pretty well considering, I've played this game pretty badly. I've missed at least, I think, 4 points of damage and missed a few tempo plays just because I was getting a little too cute earlier and I wasn't actually playing that tight. And it's funny because I think my opponent stumbled quite a bit early. I think this Grixis deck is prone to do that, but their power level also bails them out at this point in the game because they can just set up something. I haven't punished them for stumbling, and then they get to sort of pay off the setup. If at any point they can reanimate this Oculus or even just cast another Oculus, we end up losing the game. They have a frog in play that I luckily rip a removal spell for, but I have to use it here. Otherwise, I am very far behind. Now, I elect to wait for them to block to use it. Again, I think this is not necessarily loose of me or wrong because it gets an extra few points out of their, or gets an extra few cards out of their hand, but it does kind of really show the impact of not getting that extra few points of damage. Or if I could have given this other 2/1 cat token flying, I could have attacked for a lot more damage. I could have killed the frog and then just end up killing them. And again, they have a follow-up Oculus here, and we are just very punished. A few turns go by, they cast an Oculus, they draw an Emperor of Bones, they reanimate their other Oculus, they put a bunch of manifests into play, and we are now stuck at this standstill where I have a Fable with no cards in hand, but no ability to attack. They have double Faithless Looting in their graveyard, just so many creatures that they actually could just kill me at any point. I gave them way too much breathing room, and I missed too many points of damage early in the match, and I'm getting very punished for it. Now, I end up untapping on my 8th turn after the Fable trigger, and I see a Voice of Victory. Now, this line, I think, is really close. What ends up happening is I actually end up miscounting. I thought I had lethal, and I didn't. I don't know exactly why I think I didn't, or why I think I did, but I ended up just not having lethal. I was exactly 1 point off. During this thought processing, I decided that I always wanted to attack with Voice of Victory, and because I have 2 Guide of Souls, I can fly it and always make it a 5/6 so that the Oculus doesn't cleanly kill it. The other thing is I could fly 2 creatures and give 2 things flying. If I fly the Goblin and I have the cat token that flies, that's 2 4X's. If the Oculus always blocks the biggest thing, I'll have a Guide of Souls, which is a 3, a cat token, which is a 4, a Goblin Shaman token, which is a 4, and a Voice of Victory, which is a 3. If they always block with just the Oculus and have a Fatal Push, they always block the 4X's, and they take 6 and go to 1. So either their last card is exactly Fatal Push, or one of these manifests is a frog, because they would not have activated their Emperor of Bones to make an Abhorrent Oculus blocker earlier, or they would have attacked with more creatures to make me need to block or potentially block worse so that I had less opportunity to untap, attack, and kill them. This is very complicated because they could just also be representing a frog. All of this is to say that because I drew Voice of Victory and I'm attacking with it this turn, I actually have enough pressure to potentially beat a reanimated Archon or beat a frog if it's underneath one of these manifests if I decide to not go all in here and try to play the late game. The reason that is because I have enough damage to sort of untap and kill them, quite a bit of damage to even play through an Archon trigger, but I also just have a lot of good draws that push me from that position. If we keep staring at each other and they only attack with Emperor of Bones and they only have what's in play, they don't have a reanimation spell for this Archon that they've put in the graveyard, they're actually still just behind the entire time. And then there's the backside of this Fable that could come back and sort of like push me ahead. But like I said, I ended up making an attack that I thought was lethal. It is not. They did have a frog underneath one of the manifests, and we end up losing the game because of it when they untap, flip one of these manifests into an Emperor of Bones back the Archon, and kill us. So here's the combat, and I thought it was lethal. They get to block everything, and it's only 6. Or actually, they persist in Emperor of Bones, and then Emperor of Bones back the Archon, and I think this is lethal or exactly lethal. But again, we missed multiple points of damage earlier in this game, and they ended the game at 1. I just think I played this game absolutely horrifically. But whatever, on to game 2. This is the 3rd graveyard deck we've played against. So again, similar idea. Ghost Vacuums, Celestial Purges. His list is a little different. I think he has different wrath effects if I remember correctly. So I'm fine with cutting some prides in general, just because I do think that they are the worst creature to have on turn 1 generally, and one of the worst plays you can make late in the game. Also, I thought about the idea of boarding in Showdown of the Scalds because I do think that he has a bit of a grindier build, and I might want to take the game a little slower, but ultimately I elect to board in the Blood Moons because we are on the play, and if you looked at his mana base in that last game, it is pretty clunky and very greedy. Moving on to game 3 here, this hand is really strong, but also missing a little bit of what we need in some of these matchups. We have an answer. We have an early threat in Pride, which is what you want. You only really want a threat in Pride if you have an answer to their answer. And what I mean by that is, if their answer is removal spell, you need to have another threat. If their answer is not removal spell, but it's combo setup, you probably need to find a way to interact with the combo. If it's not either of those two things and it's just Psychic Frog, you need to have an answer to Psychic Frog. It's hard to set up a line where your 1-drop is punishing to beat those 3 things because it's just a wide variety of possibilities. Luckily, we did have Celestial Purge, so we beat Frog. We did have Voice, so we beat Spot Removal. We didn't have an answer to combo, but Purge answers Archon, not Oculus, but that's fine. We could hopefully dodge an Oculus. And so our hand is good enough, but I did really want a better removal spell or a way to deal with an Oculus. We drew exactly Static Prison, which is very fortunate for us, and they didn't have removal. Even if they have Frog now, it's not that big of a deal. If they have Faithless Looting into Oculus Unearth, it's a bit punishing, but with the Static Prison, it's not that big of a deal, and we have a lot of good draws to sort of, we're not even behind, but sort of continue our pressure. And the biggest threat that really shows up is that they discarded an Archon, and we're going to turn 3 with not a lot of damage in play. So this is probably one of the more difficult decisions I have in this game, and it's how to interact with his threat suite here while trying to beat his follow-up, while trying to win the game later if he can stabilize. So my options are to just Static Prison the Abhorrent Oculus, maybe dash this Ragavan and shove with everything and see what happens. I could Static Prison the Oculus, kill the token, and attack with everything and not commit the Ragavan to the board. What I ultimately elect to do is fetch Arena of Glory the Ragavan, Static Prison the Manifest, and then discharge the Oculus. The Static Prison gives me 2 energy, and the discharge gives me 3, so that's 5 energy. We get to cleanly kill the Oculus. But the most important thing is that Static Prison hitting the Manifest means that if I sacrifice the Static Prison and the Manifest isn't a creature, the card just disappears forever. If it's a creature, that's a little unlucky because they get a creature back and they don't have to pay the flip cost. If it's a Archon or another Oculus, it's pretty brutal for me, but if it's a land, if it's a spell, nothing happens, it just stays in exile, and I just sacrifice the prison. The reason I'm making this play is because it plays around Pyro the best, Pyroclasm, because Voice of Victory dodges Pyroclasm. I get to do a bunch of damage. But this is also the best turn for me to use the most amount of my mana and sort of exhaust the most amount of value I can out of my cards that I have in my hand. This Ragavan, this Static Prison, this Galvanic Discharge are only going to exchange for one card or one. And I need to make sure that when I do that, it exchanges for the most amount of value while doing what it needs to do. So when I play the Static Prison here, it not only deals with a threat, but it allows me to attack. When I play the Galvanic Discharge here, it not only kills a creature, but it allows me to attack. The Galvanic Discharge is usually hard to leverage because it doesn't kill a lot of large things. It's not going to kill an Boros Oculus later. It's not going to kill an Archon later. Let's say it does do that. If it does kill something later, it's as good as using it now because now it allows me to attack with more things also. So I'm kind of in a position where I want to cast both of my removal spells, but I'm also in a position where when I'm casting my removal spells, I'm making sure that they're doing the most. And while they're doing the most, I want to make sure that I'm using all my mana so it keeps in line with doing the most, and putting this Ragavan into play helps that idea. It pushes me towards winning the game fast. It pushes me towards making sure my removal spells do the most they can. And it adds value to the lines where my opponent doesn't have Pyroclasm. There isn't a lot of punish to this also. The times where this play is worse than making another play generally revolves around our opponent having something like Toxic Deluge or Pyroclasm or other large sweeping wrath effects, because putting the Ragavan into play is playing into that, while also just holding up Galvanic can kill an Oculus if they have a wrath effect. Static Prison, the token, pass and see what happens, see if they try to wrath us, and if they don't, then we can kill the Oculus, and then we can dash the Ragavan and sort of set up this line. The issue with that is giving them an untapped step with an Oculus in play does give them a lot more breathing room for something like reanimating an Archon, because now we're in this weird spot where we have to deal with this Oculus. We didn't exchange our turn to deal a bunch of damage, so we missed an entire attack step, and now we're stuck dealing with this Archon. The times where they have Persist and untap like they do here, and our last card is Celestial Purge, this lines up perfectly because I get to purge the Archon. I have enough damage in play with the City's Blessing, and it just seems like no matter what we did, we ended up winning. Going into game 3 here, we have a just unkeepable Goblin Bombardment 6 lands. Can't keep that. Obviously, this also kind of sucks on the draw, but I don't know if I can mulligan it. I do just really need to get lucky, and I think going to 5, I need to get lucky anyways. I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking for on 5, other than like Ghost Vacuum and some threats, but the issue with that line is that we are weak to any cards out of our opponent's deck. It's possible that if I go to 5 and I need to get lucky, the best way to try to get lucky is to just go to 5 and keep 5 with 2 lands, Ghost Vacuum, card. But I also think that if that's possible, then it's possible that this 6 is fine also, and I can hopefully try to draw out of it. There aren't many cards I'm beating on turn 2. Frog is very punishing. I'm happy I didn't mull the 5 here, because this Frog would destroy me if I'm trying to lean on Ghost Vacuum. But at the same time, this Frog is likely to destroy me anyways. Again, we're trying to set up this Blood Moon, and our opponent has fetched an island. Naturally, like, they're just trying to save damage when they cast their spells on curve, and although that's good for me because their mana is pretty bad, it's also bad for me because this Blood Moon isn't going to do much. I'm in a very bad position here. My opponent is on 4 cards. They have Island Swamp when I'm holding a Blood Moon in hand, and my Ajani is just likely to not do anything. Frog is also the most powerful thing in this matchup, as it doesn't require a lot of cards to set up. It just naturally is very, very strong. Luckily for me, they didn't end up discarding and reanimating anything, but the way that they've sequenced this turn where they play 3rd land, play Emperor Bones, leave up Black Source, I just have to think that it's exactly Fatal Push. The lines I have here are to jam the Blood Moon. I think that's awful. Or play one of these other Ajanis and see if they kill the Ajani, which I also think is pretty bad, because then they just get to deal with 2 Ajanis for 1 Fatal Push, which is not a good card exchange. Again, I was pretty sure they had a Fatal Push, so I wanted to sort of exchange my cards in a 1-for-1 way so that we aren't giving them value for plays that they're going to be making. So obviously I lead with the Bombardment. Not only does it start the pressure, Ajani plus Bombardment is very strong, but it also sets up my future Ajanis without needing to commit them to the board right now. But it also allows me to leverage more damage with this Galvanic Discharge, because the Galvanic Discharge is unlikely to kill things otherwise. Not going to kill this frog a lot of the time. It's only dealing 3 damage. With Bombardment, it can deal up to 5 damage. Although that doesn't kill the frog right now, the potential is very strong. Now, when I played this Bombardment, there was a pause from my opponent. That does kind of tell me that my suspicions were right. They did have a Fatal Push. And it's important to note that I think you should normally be doing this when you're playing Boros, but in this specific circumstance, you want to act last, because acting last gives you the most amount of value out of your spells. If I were to sacrifice the cat token, they would Fatal Push the Ajani. I would then have to sacrifice the Ajani, and the Fatal Push would kill both of my creatures. Not a good exchange. To offset that, I could sacrifice the cat token and hit the Emperor of Bones. If they're going to Fatal Push the Ajani, I get to sacrifice the Ajani and hit the Emperor of Bones. Okay, we've now exchanged a Fatal Push and an Emperor of Bones for our Ajani. That's not good enough. We're still facing down this frog. We're still giving a bunch of value to their Fatal Push. And if they cast Fatal Push first, we can still kill their Emperor of Bones on that turn. We also get the opportunity to potentially flip our Ajani, which they don't want, because we can sacrifice the Cat Warrior token, zero the Ajani, and kill the Emperor of Bones. If they push the Ajani on the end step, we can potentially kill the frog, because we can Galvanic Discharge it and sacrifice both our creatures, and the frog is only an X5. What ends up happening is he ends up playing a land, which is very good for us because he can't discard as many cards from his hand to the frog. He also plays a Surveil land, which means that he doesn't have enough mana to activate this Emperor. And because we acted last, when he goes to Fatal Push this frog, this Galvanic Discharge now does the most amount it can, because we've added more value to our board when we cast our removal spells. And as you see here, the frog is a 1/2 and he has 2 cards in hand, so the biggest it can be is a 3/4. When he goes to Fatal Push the Ajani, we act last, so we get to Galvanic the frog first, see if he discards spells. I then get to discharge, deal 3 damage to the frog, sacrifice the Cat Warrior token, and flip the Ajani to blank this Fatal Push. Because he doesn't have another untapped land, Emperor of Bones is only a 2x. It can't kill the Ajani because it can't activate and put 2 counters on itself, but also they don't get another card out of this frog. What's going to happen is I'm just going to play this Ajani that I have in my hand. I'm going to zero this first Ajani. I'm just going to kill the Emperor of Bones. And all of a sudden, we went from losing to this frog on board and facing down a potential Emperor of Bones to winning the game, because we acted last. We didn't play into the spells that they possibly could have, and we leveraged all of our removal and all of our permanents to the highest ability they could have. Obviously, it helps that he kind of played into an onboard trick. Well, not necessarily onboard. He didn't know that there was a Galvanic in my hand. I was representing it pretty hard, though. And I think if he just flew the frog and just attacked for a point of damage and left open Emperor of Bones and Fatal Push, we were pretty far behind. But, again, it really helped that we set that up so it was the most punishing it could be, and punished him the most when he made that mistake. But I fast forward to the following turn. We just end up attacking for a bunch, zeroing our Ajani, playing the third Ajani, and the game's just over. Not much to be said about that. After we dealt with the frog and the Emperor of Bones, there wasn't a lot of resources he had left to work with, so we got to just crush him and sort of run away with everything.